And we're here with a GHH sessions where we bring in the experts, really give you that micro analyzation of some of the things going on in the culture. Today we have criminal defense lawyer Brandon Ball, also offline a good brother, friend of mine. And hey, it's a pleasure to have you here, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I like what y'all doing.
No, most definitely. I like what you're doing too because not only do you practice law in your field, but you give us that great insight, through social media, and you always have a pointer. I actually learned what we're about to talk about from your IG story, which is that they do have a trial date now set for Ahmaud Aubrey, and you were saying that'll be on October 18th.
Yeah, October 18th.
Okay. What? I know they're totally unrelated, but do you feel like what happened with the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial will have any impact potentially on that trial with them?
Are you asking like if the jurors might try to push back against that, or
if it'll be kind of more like, more almost as if like a guilty verdict is the morally kind of right disposition. I feel like people kind of went into the George Floyd trial feeling like, hey, there's no way around this. And I was wondering if that spirit might, still kind of be in the air in regards to where we're at right now in the country as far as racial relations.
I definitely think that spirit's still in the air, especially in that case, because that's a case that didn't involve law enforcement and involved civilians acting like they were law enforcement, and then just as many people who saw the George Floyd tape, they saw the Ahmaud Aubrey tape, right? And they saw what happened and they heard about it, right? So I think that spirit is still there.
So
regarding that,
with them, the charged not being affiliated with law enforcement, I guess easier isn't the word, but I guess is there a less of a burden of things to prove with it being a civilian? Basically like a civilian homicide versus like a police killing.
So what I've seen in cases where people try to take the law in their own hands and act in place of law enforcement, and the things that I've seen, the cases that I've witnessed, haven't really seen much success in that in that arena. So like the defendants in that case, the three guys trying to say, because they've changed their story up a couple times, but the father and son have kind of kept their story the same. It's the third guy, okay, who's got dragged into it as well. And initially he was just trying to put it on the father and son. But I think it's going to be a tougher case for them, right? Because law enforcement have that, it's the way it is in America. People give law enforcement benefit of the doubt. Now, since George Floyd, that's starting to change a little bit, mm-hmm, right? People starting to see that what we all knew the whole time. But as a lawyer, I can actually talk about it and make decisions about it when I'm picking a jury, right? So when you look at these people, these defendants in this case, to your point, I think it's going to be more of an uphill burden because, again, they're not cops. They went out their way. They were being, quote, unquote, extra about it, right? And it caused somebody being murdered.
Will like all three of them be charged together, or will it be separate? I mean, will it be like a separate, each one basically a verdict for their role, or is it like I don't know, are all three of them on the same?
So from everything it looks like, they'll be in trial together, but they each individually have to be found guilty or not guilty.
Okay.
So one person being found guilty doesn't necessarily mean the second person be found guilty, right? But more than likely, with their actions being in concert, if one person was found guilty, more than likely the other people will be found guilty. Okay.
And one thing we did with the George Floyd, when I was talking to Attorney Darrell Austin, we always try to take an objective look and take a look from both sides. Not that we support the other side, but just what are some strategies do you maybe foresee their legal counsel the picture that you foresee them trying to paint the defense of the three accused?
Operating on the belief that they thought he was a person who had just burglarized the home, right? That's been their story. I thought he was in these homes. We had report that somebody had burglarized his house. We saw this guy running. We thought that was a person, and so we were just trying to stop him. At that point, when we tried to stop him, he came at us, and then it became a defense situation. We were trying to defend ourselves.
Wow, it's amazing to me how that self-defense spin can just be put on things. Because would this pretty much be kind of the same archetype of a case as the Zimmerman Trayvon case?
It's a little different. Well, obviously it's a different state. That was Florida. This is Georgia. There are some similarities because, again, in Zimmerman's situation, he went out his way, and 911 told him, "Hey, don't do anything. Stay right here," and he still took it upon himself to go forward. So from that standpoint of them going out their way, there's some similarities, but the belief that they're going to run into issues, the defendants in this case, they're going to run into more issues because I'm pretty sure the state's going to bring out that it wasn't reasonable for you to think that he had burglarized the home. What reports are you talking about? What did you hear? Where's that information that you're saying you based that off on?
I know that Georgia, we're talking about different states, so the laws probably aren't exactly the same. But I guess one of the things that's kind of intriguing to me is like, at what point do you lose the right? Okay, if I see somebody and I believe someone is breaking in a home, and I have a weapon, and I'm, I guess, standing my ground, and then someone says no, don't, someone on the phone says not to follow them, not to pursue. At what point am I breaking the law?
So, big answer then small answer. Big answer, it varies state to state because the laws regarding staying your ground vary state to state, right? It could be argued, looking at the Zimmerman situation, that because he was affirmatively told by 911 operators not to do anything, that he could have been breaking the law. But they were able to overcome that burden, right? They were able to overcome that. So that's why we literally go to trial, right? Because in one case, it could be seen as based off the facts that this person is breaking the law. In another case, same set of facts, based off how the argument is made, it could be seen the person wasn't because of their perception, because of what was going on at the time. So that's literally why people go to trial, to argue that. Just because you have a dead body doesn't mean it's a murder. All right?
Oh, okay. And one other thing, like why was the George Floyd case seem like almost expedited? It seemed like that in the police brutality documented history, that seemed like the most efficient act to verdict that I've seen versus like I think we're what going on two and a half years since. I know that was before the pandemic, and that was the actual death of Ahmaud Aubrey.
No, Ahmaud Aubrey was when the pandemic had just kicked off.
Oh, that was just a little more than a year ago.
Yeah, that's what made it a crazy spring, And then you had George Floyd's situation.
Wow, because I remember I think it was run 1.2 miles that night, and it was in his commemoration.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay, well,
but no, you asked about. It seemed like it was quick. I thought that as well. I couldn't believe how quick that trial went from incident to actual trial. Usually, when it comes to cases like that, murder case or high-profile felony, or just a complicated felony where there's a lot of moving pieces involved and a lot of things at stake, they take a long time. Especially with the pandemic. But some states, not Texas, have laws where cases have to go at a certain amount of time. I'm not sure that was the case in Minnesota. I think they just were ready to go in that case and went forward. But usually, you don't see cases go that quickly. And
do you think, like in Georgia, I know a lot of people kind of credited what happened in Minnesota also to the district attorney and basically some diversity that they had and some people who actually wanted things to move forward. Do you think the role of the Georgia whoever prosecute and their will to convict is going to have a role on whether whether we see the type of trial that we saw with George Floyd?
I think it's on a good track because initially the DA that was over the case, the investigation was stalling, wasn't going anywhere. Another district attorney took it over and investigated the case and started moving it, right? So I think if we look at that, I think obviously they want to prosecute the case, but I think it's a good sign that they'll have all their ducks in a row by the time the case is ready to go to trial.
Okay. Well, that's what's going on with Ahmaud Aubrey. There's another news breaking story that just came out this week, which was about gentleman Ledell Lee, who was basically lethal injection via death row, and now it's coming out that the DNA on the murder weapon is not his. And just in doing some research, preparing to talk to you, came across some real interesting stats. I didn't really realize the level of racial disparity when it comes to the death penalty, and I didn't even realize that 1 in every 9 people that lives are terminated via death penalty are later exonerated. That just seems like a ridiculously high number.
Yeah.
If I just think about anything else, if 1 out of 9, that's what 12% basically, right, somewhere around that. If 12% of flights one day, had problems and didn't make it to the destination, we would shut down the whole airline industry.
Right.
12% of cars had a defect that made someone get in an accident. That car would be taken off of the availability. So the okayness in that level of error was shocking to me.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to look at who's dying, right? It's not, it's people who look like me and you, right? It's people who look like me and you in the criminal justice system. Take the opioid epidemic. We know what that is now because it's not me and you dealing with it. Even though people who look like me and you have been dealing with it, it's coined a different term when people who don't look like, exactly, because now white people and people who are in positions of power and their children and their relatives are dealing with it becomes something else. So it's really, you got to look at who's dying.
And that was, man, speaking of that, I didn't realize this. Now, this is in Georgia, but I'm sure that these numbers are probably on scale a lot of other, in Texas and other states with the death penalty. But a person is 11 times more likely to be executed for a crime if the victim is white, and 22 times more likely if the offender is black and the victim is white, which is it's crazy. I mean, just going from the amount of what we make up just population wise in America compared to being 42% of death row terminations, and then also just this rate of receiving it based on the victim, just a stat that seems like we really haven't made any progress. You think about civil rights, a lot of the things that we touch on the show, if anything, seems like this area has gotten worse.
Yeah. So when I hear you say that and I hear you speak those numbers, right, the argument we make about people not voting, right? It says, hey, man, you got to vote. Every vote matters. And people are like, my vote don't really matter. Well, in the area of law, I try to make people understand how important jury service is, right? How to make sure they have your right address to be sending information. If you do get a summons to appear to jury, show up, because you never know. You showing up could be that difference that saves somebody's life, that gives somebody a different perspective, right? It's really, really not a jury of our peers. It's really not. It's a jury of our peers who show up, right? And we have, let's be honest, a lot of us have issues and distrust with the criminal justice system. So that keeps us from doing it. But in part of that, those stats being what they are, is because you have people who don't look like us determining what happened with us, who judging our character, people telling our story. I have this saying, I tell people that, we're 13% of the population in America, right? The only time I feel like I'm in the majority is when I walk into the courtroom, right? Because when I walk into the courtroom, everybody looks like me, but they're on the other side of the bar.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Because what's that about? 13% of the population, but why is everybody in this courtroom?
Man, that was a sad bar right there.
Yeah, it was.
So I never heard, but you just really opened my eyes to something new, because when we discuss ways and things that we can do to be more active. And like you said, usually it's going to be around vote or, those type of things. I didn't really necessarily ever hear the civic duty of showing up to jury duty as basically a form of, maybe not activism, but a form of basically ensuring our ability to, get a fair trial. Is that a problem, like systemically, with lack of maybe Black Americans being participants in jury duty? Do we just not show up, or do we? What are we doing right now, or what could we be doing to, increase our participation?
Well, so show up, right? When you get that jury call, show up, because this is what happens when you get into court. When you get into court, and prosecutors ain't gonna tell you this, but if the defendant is Black and they have potential Black jurors, they're gonna find ways to strike those Black jurors. So if 15 Black people are called to jury service and 5 people show up, it's really easy to find a reason to excuse 5 Black people, right? But if all 15 of them show up, it makes it a lot harder, right? And then you have people who look like you in that jury box potentially. Now, I'm not saying it's a guarantee that just because you have somebody that looks like you in the jury box means you're going to just get a not guilty or you're not going to get some time. But I think when it comes to, so for example, in Texas, trial has 2 parts in a criminal trial. There's guilt and innocence, and then there's punishment, right? Mm-hmm. So if somebody's found guilty, then we proceed to punishment. And the jury, a lot of times, if it's elected to, decides that punishment. And in that phase of the trial, it's really about that person's story, who they are, their upbringing, what played into what's going on with them. That could matter, right? Because you can relate to that. You could be like, I know that dude. He reminds me of my cousin. Things like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because if it came down to like sentencing, I feel like a Black man, and the story came out, and I heard some things in his story, I could have a certain level of compassion, because I'm like, okay, man, that guy really had a, versus if it was somebody, if I was listening to be honest, if I was listening to a Cambodian man's story, I wouldn't know his struggle.
Can't really relate.
So now that makes a lot of sense, man. Well, hey, man, this is just the beginning of our latest contributor, GHH. We building
y'all doing big things.
No, we building the 73 win Warriors over here, man. We already had Steph. We already had Steph, and Clay, but now we bringing in KG.
So you're not trying to have a championship.
Draymond. Well, we already got 2 rings.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try not to get a tech in the final.
Man. Well, hey, man, appreciate it, man. Look forward to building with you more on the show, man.
Hey, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate y'all.
If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.